Thank you everyone for coming. We're going to start the event right now. My name is Moey Sutton. I moved to Israel 8 years ago, and I grew up here in the community. In the summer, I used to live right around the corner on Joanna Court. I used to come to the summer camp here. Anyway, I thought of doing this event. It's really, I think, the first of its kind in our community, because Aliyah is a phenomenon in our community, whether we like it or we don't like it. I think it's something that people think about more than they talk about. It's something that's difficult to talk about publicly. Not everyone wants to touch it for whatever reason. But my experience growing up here was that it's something people think about, people want to do. But there's not as much information as there could be about what it's like, specifically from our community, moving to Israel. There's a lot of cliches about our community. My favorite is tight-knit, and that's something that people feel makes our community different. It's a hindrance. In my experience, that characteristic of our community carries over. For me, at least it did. After moving to Israel, I met some of the wonderful people on this panel only because I was in Israel, because we sought each other out. And the other thing I want to explain about this panel is why we're doing it today. Why have an event talking about Aliyah, answering questions on Tish'a. Yesterday was Tish'a, but the class is today, so why do it today? Our rabbis teach us in Tawil of all the tragedies that occurred on Tish'a. The first one, and the one that the Gemara says is the reason that this date was chosen to be a date of tragedies for generations, is, anyone know? Exactly. Today is the day, this is that it was decreed our forefathers in the desert, our ancestors, would not enter the land of Israel because they listened to the spies who said, it's impossible, we can't do it. They toured the land for 40 days, they brought back the fruit, they said, Jannah, it's amazing, but too difficult, might as well go back to Egypt, we can't conquer the land. And as a result, not only did that generation have to wander the desert, but forever, Tish'a became the date of tragedies. So the goal is to sort of correct that mistake, and all of us on this panel live in Israel, self-included. We want to say it is possible. We want to share our stories, and hopefully we can put an end to this madness. You know, so many years, so many generations, mourning, fasting, crying. Why do we still have to keep doing it? It's sad, really. It's sort of embarrassing that every year we say, the fast starts tomorrow, 8:02, if Mashiach doesn't come before then. We've been waiting for so long. We live in a generation where we're fortunate enough to see God's miracles. We say at the end of Megillat Eicha, Hashivenu Adonai Elecha v'nashuba. God, bring us back to you. Come back and get us, and we will return. And I think that we live in a generation where God has come back for us, and now it's our move. And it's time for us to figure out how to make it happen, to say loud and clear, yes, God, we want to come back to you. We've seen enough miracles. We don't have to wait anymore. We're all in. And that's the context for a lot of my decisions to make Aliyah and in sharing our stories on Tish'a. So, as I said, my name is Moey Sutton. My wife is Ellie Blanco. We got married in 2013, and we moved to Israel together in 2014. Since then, we've been blessed with 3 wonderful children, and we live in Moey. That's just the, in a nutshell. And I'm going to let everyone else share their name, how many kids they have when they move to Israel, and then we'll give everyone else another turn to tell their story more in depth. Do I have a first volunteer? Miriam.
Good. My name is Miriam. Together with my husband Saul, we made Aliyah 16 years ago. We live in Jerusalem, thank God. We have 6 children, and we're proud to say we have our 3rd soldier in the Israeli army.
I need more time.
Just in a nutshell, you're going to get more time later.
Okay. My name is David Dweck. We live in Renana. We happen to be in the Chevron room. I don't know why, but the Renana room would have been important. 4 children, oldest 20, actually 21, 18, 19, no, not 19 yet, 18, 13 and 10. And my son just left back to Israel to go to the army to send Khadid the paratrooper. And my wife Rachel, she's not here, she's driving Aliyah to the airport now.
My name is Edward Benjamin. I made Aliyah by myself when I was 24. I live in Yerushalayim. I'm married to Achimal Ma'aruf, and we have one daughter who is almost 9 months old.
What year was it when you made Aliyah?
It was 2019.
Okay, perfect.
Hi everyone, my name is Adele. I moved to Israel 6 years ago when I was single. I was 27. I got married a year and a half ago to Rabbi son of Rabbi and we have one beautiful daughter, 9 months old, sitting in the park.
Hi guys, I'm Pattie Baum, married to Danny Baum. We made Aliyah August 2020 at the height of Corona. Made it. Hashem is still there. We're there 2 years. We have 2 American children and 1 beautiful Israeli.
I'm Matthew Salmon. I'm married to formerly SCA, moved to Israel 2 years ago. 4 kids, ages now 12, 11, 8, and 5. 5 is pretty much Israeli at this point. We also moved in the middle of COVID and never went back. I live in Renana, which is the future home of the Israeli Syrian community, or American Israeli Syrian community.
And when did you make Aliyah?
2 years ago.
All right, we're not tomorrow. Who's going to start with some more questions? You guys know the questions? All right, Adele. Thanks for volunteering.
So, do you want it?
I don't know if my odds.
Yeah.
When I was 17, I spent a year in Israel, a child being a woman after high school. If you want to hear more about the experience, there's books on the stage, you can self-accompany. And after spending a year in Israel, it was the first time I realized, I actually could live here and make a life for myself. And the reason why I realized it can be real was because my previous experiences were bar mitzvah trips. I had the time of my life, loved, and encouraged you all to go on bar mitzvah trips, the tour guide. And all of a sudden, I'm there for a year, and I spent a lot of Shabbat at the homes of other Syrian people like Aliyah, Miriam, and one before me. And when I saw that they lived there, and they were from the community, and they had beautiful lives, I said it could be a real thing. And that was the first time I decided that I think I want that for myself as well. Now, I come back to America, I go to college, and my plan was, I'm going to get married and make Aliyah. Because who makes Aliyah single? That's crazy. So every year, I go out on dates, waiting, going out with guys. I don't meet anyone. Going. Now I'm getting older, time's going on, and as the years passed, my need and desire to be in Israel just kept growing. I taught for 6 years at Yeshiva, and every time they would have an assembly and Yom HaTzmaut, do anything Israel related, I would cry because I wanted to be there so badly. And I always prayed that when it was the right time for me to move, I would know in my heart. I didn't have a specific, I'm going to move in 5 years, in 2 years, when I'm married. I wanted it to be married, but I said I'll know in my heart. And when I was 26, I just knew it was the right time for me to go. In 10 seconds, the trigger, I went out with a guy. People always told me, if you want to make Aliyah, you're never going to get married, because the second the guy hears Israel, he's going to run away. I didn't find that to be the case, but I went out with a guy, and first date, and he said, one day I think it would be nice to raise my family in Israel. Without letting me make it clear. I would never, ever moving to Israel. And then, okay, we finished the date, should we go out again? I don't know. I said, I'll go out again, I'll put Israel on the side. But it was the first time I heard that someone would not be prepared. And at that point, my identity was so connected. I said, I can't get married and not move. So want to live in Israel, if I go out with guys that already live there, it's half the battle. And then I don't have to deal with my husband's family not wanting to go. And I think probably most of us will say that our families weren't, yay, we're so excited. My family didn't want me to go. So I made Aliyah alone. And what you do in Israel as a single person is you live with roommates typically. The way you find roommates is you go on Facebook and you live with random people that also need roommates. So I did that. I moved to Jerusalem. And I mentioned I was a teacher, but I wanted to switch careers when I moved to Israel. I said I want to be a tour guide because I think I would enjoy it more and my heart is really in that. And I wanted to stay connected to the community. And I love that I still can stay connected. So I taught English for 2 years until I got my tour guiding license. And once I got it, I started doing community governments and trips to whoever wanted, and I loved it. And I would say my biggest challenge in moving then and still today, challenge that I have was socially, because I wasn't at an age where I was meeting friends in college. I didn't have kids that were going to the park and making friends with other moms. Where was I meeting friends? So that was my hardest part, and it's still a challenge, but now I have a baby to take to the park and make friends with other moms. So that was harder for me. I made friends with Israeli families that adopted me. From Eileen, Shiloh Plester's family adopted me. Edith and Aliyah from Spain adopted me. And that really gave me a sense of family, so I didn't feel like that wasn't hard, it was really more socially. And dating is hard anywhere. It's hard in America, it's hard in Israel, but a different discussion. Eventually I met my husband, who is Israeli, born and raised there, but his dad, Rabbi, grew up here and made out himself. So amazing story how the chances of finding someone in the community did not exist, and yet I managed to do that. My last thing that I want to add is I'm a very positive person, and before I moved, I would speak to Israelis and say, I can't wait to move, it's going to be so amazing. You walk down the street, and Abraham Avinu walk down the street, and they say, Israel's not beaches and cream. And you think it's like this great, amazing place, and you're going to get there, and you're going to see that it's not like that. I'm living there 6 years, and I still have yet to wake up from that dream. Every day I'm there. More and more and more and more. I'm grateful. I thank God multiple times. Thank you for giving me a life in Israel. I wake up and I'm in the land of Nebuah. I'm in the land of God. When people ask me why you make Aliyah in one word, I say, because of the Tanakh. After learning Tanakh and teaching Tanakh, we open up Sefer Devarim. It's clear that the place of the Jewish people is there. And I said, I know the future of the Jews is in Eretz Yisrael. I want to be a part of it. I don't want to watch on the sidelines. So I moved to Israel, and it was one of the best decisions I ever made in my entire life. I thank God for it.
Thank you. I just want to echo one thing that you mentioned. It's this notion that there has to be some sort of crisis where you realize this is a horrible decision. I don't belong here. What am I doing? It's something that I feel many Israelis seem to believe. Many people in general feel like it's too good to be true that you could do something like this and really be happy with your decision. But my experience as well, from myself and talking to other people who made Aliyah, whether it's 5 years, 10 years, 30 years, it's generally not the case. That there's some sort of, reality checking in. So I just wanted to touch on that point. Now I will pick Edward to take the Rabbi Edward Benjamin to take the microphone next. So Edward, before you start, I thought it was interesting what Adele brought up, how she dated here, and you said you go on a date, and you said, oh, Israel's not a deal breaker. Rabbi Edward Benjamin, you moved to Israel when you were single. If you could touch on your experience with that as well, I think it'd be nice to hear.
Sure.
From my experience, there are people who make Aliyah when they're single from our community. It doesn't make as much noise. When a family moves, a couple moves, then people hear about it. If someone's single, it's not really such a groundbreaking thing. A single young adult is not so grounded anyway. I don't think it makes that much noise. But definitely is a phenomenon that happens, and I'd love to hear your experience.
Sure. So, I think Adele and I have a lot of similar experiences. school, to Tish'a, and similar to what Adele described, just feeling that this is really the future of the Jewish people. This is where we need to be. And I didn't have a concrete plan or some sort of 5-year plan, 10-year plan, or anything. I just knew in the back of my head that I got to get back here someday. Somehow, I'm not really sure. Maybe I'll figure it out. And when I went back to the States, I went to college. I was learning in the morning, and as I'm dating, I'm deciding whether or not I want to make it an issue. In terms of, is this going to be something that I'm going to talk about right away, not right away? And I got a lot of different, interestingly, people's opinions of people that live in Israel, giving me advice one way and the other way. Actually, pretty surprisingly, it was usually counterintuitive. But at the end of the day, for me, it was almost impossible to really find someone here that was as passionate and devoted to doing it, or at least, saying that outright. Maybe they would think that, but they didn't want to commit. I don't know. So I ended up going to Israel when I was single. I was part of the beginning of the yeshiva that started there, Yeshivat Moreshet Yerushalayim. Shout out. And it was more for me. I had the advantage of it. Sort of, that was like a trial that I could, jump onto this program, work there, see if it was something viable, and take it year by year. And it's just been getting, more and more easy as the years have gone. That was actually in 2016. I did it for a while I was in Israel as well. It was a little bit difficult, but like you said, it's difficult here, it's difficult there. But I definitely felt that dating people there, it's a conversation. I'm not going to get into that. I ended up coming back when I was here during Corona, and I met my wife here. But it was quite clear from the beginning that she knew I lived in Israel. I knew she was 100% willing to live in Israel. She had lived in Israel growing up.
Your wife is?
Yeah, so my wife is so
Right.
she had lived in Israel growing up back and forth. And she knew that her parents were planning on making Aliyah at some point also. So if it wasn't with me, it was going to be with them. So we made Aliyah, she made Aliyah, it's not really considered Aliyah, whatever it is, in August after we got married.
Very nice.
Yeah. So just to give a little bit of background in terms of, how I became so passionate about making Aliyah in Israel. Someone told me something, I'm pretty sure it was when I was in my year in Israel, or maybe shortly thereafter. They basically said, look, I asked them, I would, go to people's families and ask them questions, and, why are you doing this, what's going on? And they said a sentence that really resonated with me, and I still think about it all the time, especially now that I have a daughter. They said, I moved away from my parents so that my children don't move away from me. Because I can't pretend like the world isn't going in a certain direction and that we're all going to Israel. So I'm going to move away from my parents and I'll suffer, but my children will be okay, and I won't have to suffer when they leave from my home to come to Israel. And thinking about that and really internalizing that has really stayed with me. And even though, I don't really probably have the greatest social life in Israel, I get just, it is what it is. I don't have a ton of friends, not as much as here. But at the end of the day, in my head, I just keep saying this is, for my children, and if I'm not at home in Israeli culture and society, it doesn't matter because I know they will be, and I'll live through that.
I want to ask you to pass the microphone to Pattie, and I'll explain why. Something that you said, the way you phrased it, I thought it was very important. I'm moving away from my family so they don't have to move away from me. So it seemed like that's something that can create a situation of sort of survivor's guilt. And it's something that I feel sometimes also. Just looking back at my personal history, thinking about my grandparents, great-grandparents, so many generations back, and I'm the only one, most likely, that gets to do this. That gets to make Aliyah, to be the one that, in my family tree forever, that was the guy that came back to Israel. No one else did it for centuries. No one else could do it. And I sort of snatched that opportunity. And there's many great things about moving to Israel, but exactly, you spare yourself and your family moving away from you, but it's at the expense of people who are left behind. And that's why I asked you to pass the microphone to Pattie, that we talked about before. Pattie has an interesting experience because she knows what it feels like. Her aunt and uncle moved to Israel, and her cousins all grew up there, and she grew up here. So Pattie, if you will, tell us a little about your story.
Okay, so growing up, when I was about 3 years old, my uncle and aunt made Aliyah to Efrat, and they took my cousins, my only first cousins, with them. And they had more, Baruch Hashem. But we had a hard time, barely seeing them, not going to see them in class, not going to school with them, not having play dates with them anymore. But my family and my uncle's family made it a point to stay close. So any opportunity that we could, we went back and forth for Sukkot, for a bar mitzvah, for a bat mitzvah, for anything. And we really stayed very close, like almost as close as siblings, I would say. And that's how my love of Israel grew, I have to say. Besides her going to school, Mac David, very Zionistic spirit. Growing up there, every time I went, and I'm sure some of you guys know this feeling, every time I went, I would have the best time. My soul felt full. And every time I left, I would get home and I was in this funk. And I was like, ugh, why am I here? I want to go back. For 2 weeks, you just feel it until it fades and you get back into it. So it was hard without my cousins. I'm with them now, though, so it's nice. But I totally felt that as a kid. And I'm hoping that our move will inspire my nieces and nephews to make it over and get my siblings there. Looking at you, Jaime. So before me and Danny got married, it was definitely a talk, and I definitely had that 5 to 10 year plan, because I am a planner. We had a talk before we got engaged. I said, this ain't happening unless there's a chance we're moving in 5 years. He's like, I don't know if I can do 5 years. He started his job, his career, and I said, fine, let's do 10, but every year until we get there, we have to visit, if we can. And Baruch Hashem, we visited every year until we got there. We got there year 9, so we made it in the clutch, yeah. It took pushing, it took, talking about it every year. Are we going this year? Are we going this year? I don't know, maybe, I don't know. I thought the dream was dead, and then one summer, my cousins came, they riled him up, and he said, all right, let's just go. So we did all of our planning, all of our paperwork, apostilles, back and forth from the city to New Jersey, a lot of paperwork, and then lockdown happened, and we got our congratulations, you've been approved for Aliyah during the 2 weeks to slow the spread, and we looked at each other like, should we do it? Should we go? Like, we don't know what the world's going to be like. And we ended up taking the plunge. We said, we don't know when we're going to get an opportunity like this again. And we love it. I mean, we love coming back to see everybody. Everybody says, you come every summer. I said, yes, it's very important to me that my kids continue to have that relationship with their first cousins, because they're like siblings also. We left them, we were living behind each other, they would run through the backyard. It's hard to leave, but we made it a point to come back and try and come back at least once a year so they can have that quality time with their cousins, so they can still be with the community, integrated into the community, because this community is something very special. And I think if we all can get over there ASAP, it'll be something special. We love it. I don't know what else to say. So, my kids were 6 and 4 when we moved. For my oldest, she was a mature 6, so she had a social life. She was very, but my cool friends, But she was also excited to see her cousins. My 4-year-old had no idea what was flying. He was like, okay, cool, we're going on the airplane. We get there, and the beginning was hard for my daughter because there were 2 lockdowns. So anytime we started to do something, she would get adjusted, she would make new friends, and then boom, she was home for 4 weeks. But now, year 2, she's doing great. They both they fight in Hebrew now with each other. Yeah, it's the craziest thing. My son afterwards thinks in Hebrew. And Baruch Hashem, we had a baby there. We landed, and 9 months later, to the day, Baruch Hashem. Yeah, Hashem was like, you know, it's a blessing. I have to say also another thing. Aliyah I'm a very spiritual person, and Aliyah is a very spiritual experience, I think, for some people, for me specifically. I put my mind to it, and Hashem made it possible every step of the way. He made it easy for us when I saw other people struggling, you know, and I always say, like, if you just jump, Hashem will help you. I think that's a very important mindset to have, a very positive mindset. You know, sometimes you don't always have everything planned out, and things can go haywire bureaucratically. You know, Israelis, they're feisty and everything. But if you just be you, be positive, have faith that Hashem will get you through the struggle, and it won't be a struggle. It wasn't a struggle. Thank God.
Thank you, Pattie.
Wow. First of all, this is a historic moment here. The fact that you're all listening to this means you're all thinking about it, and you can start the process now. It takes 6 months. So I'm going to say, to start, why we moved to Israel, it's my parents' fault. It's always important to blame our parents. My parents were very, very Zionistic in nature. The year I went to Israel to BMT at the time was the first year I fell in love with Israel. Earlier, I think we went on a bar mitzvah for my brother Baum when I was 8 years old, so I really didn't remember it. But the year in Israel, when you learn there for the year, you just fall in love. And you say, one day, you're going to do it, you're going to move, you say it, come back to the community, and all the fun things go on, and you say, okay, you put it on the back burner. But then I went to YU, everyone went to Sky Ricky Novik over here for 3 years. And every year we would go for a month, for January, to Israel to go to our yeshiva, to visit. We'd stay, we don't even know what hotels we would stay in, they were like $40 a night. And we'd get through, we were on a budget, and you'd fall in love. And then, thank God, a few years later, I met my wife, and we got married. She was never to Israel before we were married. First time she went was for my oldest nephew, Aliyah's bar mitzvah. She went, she didn't go to the next one because we just had a baby, and then we went for Isaac's, my nephew Isaac's over there. That's when something clicked in my brain. And I said, listen, honey, we gotta go to Israel more often, but not bar mitzvahs. I love bar mitzvah trips. I want them to book all the tours with you, Adele. But it's exhausting when you go on the bus at 8 a.m. and you come out at 11. It's exhausting. You don't get to enjoy the culture, the people, sit on the beaches, sit at the cafes, because you're always running from thing to thing, because all the tour guides pack 6 things in one day, as if you've never been to Israel. And I told Rachel, let's go one holiday. And we decided to pick Pesach, to the dismay of our family that were not happy, both sides of the family, the Dweck side especially. Why are you going, why are you going? And we started, this was about 8 years ago, 9 years ago, we're going for Pesach. First we went alone, just us, in the Inbal Hotel having a seder with everybody we don't know, okay? And it was a hard sit there. We kept on saying we missed our family. We have so much fun at the sit there. And then all of a sudden, we broke out in a song, the Italian with everybody either in their 60s and 70s and whatever, to who knows one is Hashem, that I learned in high school. And then the next year, Joey and Sally Shamma joined us. And then the next year, we had, all of a sudden we went, I think it was 2018, 8 families came with us to Israel for Pesach. We got our own rooms, private rooms, all the hotels were kissing up to us, it was great. And we were planning the trip. We were going to all different places, restaurants, it was amazing. And all the kids were meeting each other, and I remember saying the last night in the Herod Hotel in Herzliya, listen, you all can be in Cabo or wherever you are, but we're here in Israel in 2018. This is the future. Still had no idea we were moving to Israel at that point. I was doing a lot of reading, a lot of early Zionism or whatever, Menachem Begin, the book, The Prime Ministers. So on February 1st, 2019, I will never forget, it was 12:20, and my wife was still up checking her phone, and I was reading this book, Daniel Gordis, about Menachem Begin, and I said, honey, this is all I said, I want you to know how this worked. Honey, it's time to move. And do you know what her answer was? Should already know from Instagram, if you don't. Okay. Let's make the plan to go when Sion is there for the year in Israel. Great. We now started a plan. I called Ricky Novak at the time. I'm like, my wife said, yes, I can't believe it. I don't think I was that surprised as when we got married. Said, we got to make this happen. Jewish agency, we start calling everything. But the first thing we needed to do was talk to each of our kids. We took out each of them one-on-one. We took out Sion first. And we explained it. And we said, listen, why are we moving? And Sion really asked me, like, why? And I said, this is the dream of the Jewish people. Every tefillah, every holiday, everything is based on being in the land of Israel. Everything we do. And we started planning and moving forward, and then had a great summer camp registration. Everything was great, and then the world went upside down with Corona. So you know what my wife's response was? It was the most amazing response. After we got through it and somehow we were able to open that summer, she goes, let's leave 6 months earlier. Couldn't believe it. I'm like, still living in a dream. She still said yes to me when we got married, and this was the second time. 6 months before, she goes, let's go in January. Sion will go to your brother's house in 6 months for his school, and we'll do it. We moved as fast as we could with the Jewish agency. We started in August. We finally got our approvals. January 3rd, I wasn't waiting for the Aliyah flight. We booked as fast as we could for June 20th. Honey, we gotta get out of here because we don't know if they're gonna close the airport. We gotta get out of here. We booked the tickets for January 19th. Now, when we talk about the challenges, we were going, but we had a very big challenge, two very big challenges. First of all, Sion wasn't coming with us, and my oldest, who was 20, Ellie, who's now in the Army, okay, refused to come with us. I'm not coming. It was a very, very difficult challenge and decision. So this is what we're doing. We're going to try it out for a few years. If you don't want to come, you don't have to come yet. We get on the plane. It was very hard. We left the four of us. It was really a challenge for our family. We went. We got there. We landed at the emptiest airport you will ever see in your life. I'm used to every holiday, it's packed, everyone's screaming and yelling at you. There was no one there. We got to our house, we had a bunch of Syrian families greet us in Renata. It was raining. We walk into the house. This house is not as big as a house in Brooklyn. What the heck is this? We picked it on WhatsApp. There's 120 boxes and we can't walk. They're celebrating, and me and my wife look at each other. What are we doing here? We get in there. It's okay, one thing at a time. Thank God we had easy landing. I know David's here somewhere. They got some of the stuff unpacked for us. And then we spent the next few months, the next month, 6 weeks, getting adjusted. But that was just the beginning of the story. I'm not going to go on to it too much longer, but this is the part that we didn't have Sion and we didn't have Aliyah. The next test was we couldn't get out because of this guy's wedding. We needed to come back to America. Israel was not giving permission for us to leave. It was Corona. We couldn't get out. I don't know what it was at the time. We had this thing next to Bennett's house in Minyan. We had to send it to Tawil. I never heard of it in my entire life. Abusha, never heard of these things. Go, have it, drinks, whatever it is. We just got a letter that the boys were not accepted to come back into the country. Forget that we couldn't leave. If we leave, we may not come back. They weren't accepted. Talking to all these Likud guys and giving drinks to them. And I'm like, listen, I just got rejected. Oh, we know Miriam Regular. She's the head of it. We'll ask her. Now, it's Saturday night. We're leaving Monday for the wedding. We finally got permission to do that, but being told we may not get back. We get Monday. We get rejected. I'm having drinks with these guys. They're like, we'll help you. Nothing on Monday, nothing on Tuesday. The wedding's Wednesday night. Nothing on Wednesday. I bought the 2 tickets for Aliyah and SCA to come just for Pesach. Just to come for the month. Finished the wedding, no answer. I'm taking them to the airport on flight. Now it gets moved up 5 hours earlier. So now we have to leave at 9 a.m. instead of leaving at 2 a.m. at 2 p.m. At 3:30 in the morning, we get an email. They approved Aliyah and SCA to come to Israel. You don't know the scream at 3:30 in the morning that was in my house. Excited, guys, get the luggages. Rachel goes, everything's packed, don't worry. Got it, boom, we go on the flight. We landed in Israel. It was really a surreal moment. And we were together for our first Pesach in Israel. It was amazing. So yes, it was a challenge, and the challenges of not having family are still a challenge. Corona didn't make it easier, but we got lucky that my parents were able to come and visit in December, and we hope that many of you can come and visit. So those challenges still stay there, but we love coming back to the community in the summer. There's nothing like it. And we hope that we inspire more of you guys to come.
Thank you, David. Actually, we'll pass the microphone to Miriam, we'll go back to you afterwards. And before we start talking with Miriam, I just want to touch on something that you mentioned, David. You said that you studied at BeAb some years ago, and for you that was a big moment in motivation for deciding that one day you want to live in Israel. I know you're not the only one that said it, and Adele echoed it as well, Rabbi Benjamin. So Miriam, she started a seminary for students studying after high school, that important year in Israel. But if I'm correct, Miriam, when you graduated high school, you did not study in Israel for a year. And it just, talking about myself for a second, I think that studying in Israel for a year is very important. It's a formative experience for anyone, wherever they decide to live. And for many people, it also is an exposure to life in Israel and motivate them to make Aliyah, boys and girls for sure. But for me, I can say that was a very important moment for me. I was fortunate to study in Israel, but it was not where my motivation to live in Israel started. Definitely not. Something that I knew before that, and I feel like that experience of a year in Israel, as important as it is, people who miss out on it perhaps feel like they're missing something. There's something about Israel or about studying that they don't understand. But for me, when I was in kindergarten, on Yom HaAtzmaut, this is 1995, our teacher, I didn't know what Yom HaAtzmaut, but the teacher set up all the chairs in rows in the classroom, and there were pictures of Israel all around. And she said, we're going to Israel. I had never been to Israel before, but I still remember it because at that moment it just clicked. And as much as I developed since then and my understanding of what Israel is and why it's important to us has become more developed, I don't feel like it's much more complicated than that. Israel's just somewhere we've always wanted to be. It's a special place, and we want to return there. Everything that I learned after that really just confirmed that, and therefore, just passing on to you, Miriam, to talk about where your motivation to move to Israel came from. You didn't have that experience here in Israel, but now, of course, you oversee many who do have that experience at your seminary. Take it away, Miriam.
Okay, so I guess for me, if I think back to what motivated me, really I was a student in Klavish High School, and there was a very important course that goes on Aliyah at the time, so called Zionism. And I remember that was a very formative experience for me, because here I was learning about this country and understanding how essential it was in terms of the Jewish people. This is our home, this is our land. I would subsequently go every year, actually, as a teenager. I think almost every year. I went to Israel on some program. So I guess I could say I had some sort of connection experiencing Israel. Even if I wasn't there for the year in Israel, I would go on these different programs, teaching kids from the press town English, or, I did Moledet, this is ancient history, takes some time. Moledet was another program that was an Aliyah, ran when I was a teenager. And I feel like the more I went, the more I wanted to be there. It was just this kind of connection. And so I did did want to go for the year in Israel, but at that time it was really not discussed. It was like, if I said I wanted to go to Mars, it would have been, more of a realistic thing. So I didn't get to go for the year in Israel. I did subsequently go to Hebrew University on a semester abroad. That I did do. I guess what I'm trying to say is I kept my connection to Israel in any way that I could, year after year. So it was very natural for me when I was thinking about my life to say I'd like to end up there one day. And like the panelists said here, it's not so easy to find somebody who shares that interest. But my husband, Tawil, did, and we spoke about it. I don't think we had concrete plans at all, but we would talk about it. That one day we'd like to end up there. So how did we end up there? My husband came home one day. He was switching jobs, and he had to change his position, working in a bank. And he just knew that I always wanted to go to Israel. And he came home one day and he said, "Would you like to go?" So that was great. Only that we had, thank God, 6 children, twins that were 6 months old, a 2.5-year-old who is now a hacker. It was just a lot, thank God. Kids ranging from 6 months to 10. But when my husband asked me, I said yes. And this was March. By August, we made Aliyah, we came to Israel. And it was during the Second Lebanon War. And that was a tricky thing in and of itself. The idea that, like everybody else said, leading family, leading our community, leading the school we helped to start, all of that was very hard. But we did it. And I remember when we got to Israel, a lot of help, a lot of people there, Rabbi Shoshani, the Vaknis, anybody who knows them. We had our own personal nefesh b'nefesh. And when we got there, I remember the country was just, the entire north, anybody remembers this war in 2006, the north was literally shut down. And complete and total strangers were taking in, complete and total strangers all over the country. And I remember feeling like, wow, like my part in this is just that, we're sticking it out, we're coming, even though of course family and everybody was very nervous about it. But I felt like this is coming home. This is home. We're not just watching what's going on for the Jewish people, we're actually participating in it. And we felt that our contribution was coming, was making Aliyah. So I don't know what else I should say.
Thank you, Miriam. I do want you to just say a word or two about the seminary, because I already mentioned it. But before you do, I want to say that I share a similar experience. I moved to Israel in 2014, and it was the very end of the war that summer, Operation Protective Edge. And I felt like it made it easier to move at such a time. I had the tickets booked plenty of time before. I did not know there was going to be a war, but I felt like it awakened an understanding in people, an appreciation for what I'm doing that I didn't have to work for. I didn't have to explain anything, and it made it seem, ironically, more sensible to be flying into a war zone. So that's something that I also experienced. And if you could just talk about the seminary.
So, a year after I was in Israel, at the time I had been working for Mag David High School, my curriculum. I continued that job when I was in Israel. And then I started to teach in some of the one-year programs that were there. And I was noticing that thousands of students are coming from all over the world to come and spend the year in Israel. But Sephardic students were just missing. I mean, they were just not even a handful. And it struck me that this should be something, this is an amazing experience that students have. It's life-changing, it's amazing. So why can't this be something that the Sephardic world also has? And I remember calling a couple of friends, students, Adele being one of them, to my apartment in Katamon. And we sat and talked in the living room a little bit about what it would take to create a program that would appeal to Sephardic students. We were thinking about the community, and we were thinking about beyond the community. And at the time, the consensus was to at least give them the opportunity to come for a half a year, because a year seemed like it was too much, not used to going away from family and all of that. So we came up with this idea to create a program that would at least offer adoption, and that was the idea for Eshel. It was born then. That's a whole other discussion in and of itself, getting something started. Like they say, yesh me'ayin, it didn't exist, and the prevailing attitude was like, why do you want to do this? I would talk to people about this idea of bringing girls to Israel, and they thought it had two heads. So it was very tough, challenging experience, similar to Aliyah, I think, also. But I kept at it, thank God, and Baruch Hashem, now we are expecting 64 students in. And one thing I do want to say, though, that I have to just put out there, my great-grandfather, Adele, was Lacham Chaim Tawil, also my sister-in-law's great-grandfather. And my husband and I take a lot of pride in the fact that he was the chief rabbi of the Sutton community, going back to the 30s now, when he was in Bensonhurst. After his wife passed away, he actually made Aliyah. And made Aliyah, I'm talking, going on a boat, doing everything he knew, and he wanted to live his last years in Israel. When he got there, he became Abed in Yerushalayim. And I have to say, it's an amazing thing, but his kever is exactly, I can draw a straight line from the window of my office to my great-grandfather's kever on Har 18. So I feel very privileged to be able to be somebody in the family that got back.
Thank you, Miriam. While the microphone is making its way back to Matthew, if you looked at the flyer, you notice that Daniel couldn't make it. He wasn't feeling well, so we have a substitute. I also just want to comment on something that Miriam mentioned in passing. Starting seminary was difficult and challenging, sort of like making Aliyah. So this is something I spoke about earlier with some of the people on the panel who made Aliyah at a younger age, and my experience wasn't really like that. There were no challenges or difficulties in moving to Israel. There was only one, and that is, of course, people that you leave behind, moving away from family. That's hard to prepare for, but I decided, like I mentioned early in my life, that I wanted to move to Israel, and some people mentioned we didn't have concrete plans. We did have concrete plans, and I can speak from my experience that I was more active in planning and made things a lot easier to move to Israel. But at the same time, in different stages of my life, I had plans and not everything went according to plan. Just in terms of career and at what age I was going to move. And there's only so much that you can do, but if you plan, then it's easier for sure. Yeah.
Thank you. I know everybody's sitting.
I didn't mean to suggest that it was a plan, but just there's a difference between picking up your life, picking up your family, and moving, changing your career, versus starting your life, starting your family, starting your career. And there's a worlds of difference in anyone's experience of making Aliyah that we have people at different stages of life. It's just a matter of when you're able to and what kind of challenges that brings.
So I know everybody's sitting, but I have to stay because I just can't sit tall, otherwise I'm muddy and not going to hear me. So I waited 23 years to make Aliyah. The first time I went to Israel was for my bar mitzvah, and I fell in love. And despite the fact that then my great grandmother passed away on it, it didn't damper anything. And then I went when I was 16, and my friend threw my glasses down one of the rivers on the trip we're in, and I was blind for almost half a week until we went home. And I still didn't care, because I was in Israel. Now I have family that moved there when I was like 5 or 6, and they moved to Hanover. So I had a little bit of support base there. But from the time I was 13, I knew I needed to go. And I went back in when I was in college, and I went back again. Every single excuse I had for all my cousins' weddings. I met my wife in college, and when we first started dating, we had the conversation. And she knew I was a crazy Hillel Israel guy. And she told me, don't date me if you want to go to Israel. I'm not leaving my family. It doesn't happen. So I said, challenge accepted. And I married her, and I kept quiet. And I kept quiet until my fourth out of my 5th cousin got married, and my mother wanted the whole family together, so we all went to Israel. And my kids were I think about half the age that I'm now. that they met their cousins in Israel for the first time. And from the second they saw each other, it was like they grew up together. And I looked at my wife and I said, this has to be. And it just got stuck in my head, and I wouldn't leave it alone. Now, at the same time, there's a lot going on, in the community, just the trajectory of things, the cost of things, just where things are headed. 4 kids. So I said, you know what? I said, spiritually, I need to be there. But in order to get my wife on board, I need some practical reason to get her on board. So I was in banking for 15 years. My entire career was just tracking trends. And I told her, this is the trend of things, and it's not sustainable. And I said, you think you're happy, but you're not happy. I know you're not happy, because you don't know what you don't know. So you don't know you're not happy, but you're not happy. So I thought, let me do some research. Let me do some research, let me see. We have family there, our kids get along with the cousins, we have a support system. You know what's my dream? Just give me a shot. Give me 2 years. So after some time, she said, okay, I'll be quick. Just because of the timing of the kids' ages and everything. So I did research, I kept hitting brick walls. It's not an easy thing making out there. I don't care what anybody says. It's not easy. When you think about everything you overcome, there's a lot. But when you overcome it, it's the sweetest thing. You don't even care what challenges you get to overcome it. So I kept hitting brick walls. I was in an industry that you can't do in Israel because of cross-border bureaucracy and regulation and everything. I had to literally leave a career for 15 years. I found a job.
Wow.
That was what time?
Actually, wow.
Oh, wow. So I left the career. I said, I found a job. I said, okay, we're doing it. It's in venture capital. Wow. It's Israel high-tech venture capital, right? So my wife said, okay. So we started the process. We're almost towards the end. COVID hit. Nothing. We were going no matter. I was going no matter what she would say. I was going no matter what. Remember driving in the lockdown. There was like one post office open and I had something no doubt. And I was driving through the streets with nobody but homeless and druggies on the streets. Everybody else was locked down. And I found the one post office just to get the last paperwork done. And this was March. It was like right when the lockdowns were happening. So, found a job. We're getting everything approved. I'm leaving my career. I'm moving to Israel to a new job. Don't know what's going to happen. And we land, and it's amazing. And we move into our Airbnb for 2 weeks while we're in lockdown. And we're in Israel. And it's crazy. I'm a guy that every time I went to Israel, I was crying in the taxi or the bus or whatever it was. I was the guy that was there. I was bawling there. One time I was crying because we left what's the famous road up in I left 2 kilos, my wife left 2 kilos of marzipan. That was one of the times when she thought I was going to do this, right? But we got through that. So, I came with 4 kids. My 4 kids, they crossed the whole ages, right? It was literally, I had to pull the trigger because my son was going to enter into middle school. I needed to get in there with statistically, I knew that I'd have a good shot. So we have 4 kids starting school. And I'll tell you, the first year wasn't easy. But what got me through is the fact that I was in Israel. The fact that I knew I was in Israel, Hashem got me there, it was amazing. And my job wasn't working out, I didn't like it, BC wasn't for me. But I was in Israel, got through my 8-year-old, or 8-year-old now 7-year-old, very difficult time at school. Very difficult time, it wasn't the right school for him. But we all go through that when we're looking at schools, right? So, my oldest son made friends immediately. My daughter, she could drop her anywhere, that's her world, great. My son, we were working through issues. My littlest one in Gan, she's pretty much Israeli, right? We got through the first year. I ended up switching my 7-year-old to new school. The second year was amazing. It was great. I ended up starting a business while I was in Israel, and Baruch Hashem is doing amazing. And what COVID taught me is that there's no reason why people should let a job stop them from making it out of their life. There's no reason why parents should stop their kids, because they're having concerns with the kids. Now look at David. David moved Aliyah to Israel. His kids have their amazing. And it was, he had his own trip. If you have it in your mind, you can make it work. I'm just going to leave off with this. There's 3 things to make Aliyah work. There's three things. It's really six. We're going to do some give our rocks. Three, that's six, right? Okay. So what are those three? Number one, we're going to go with Hashem say. What's Hashem say? You have to follow three things. Number one, you have to have emunah b'tachon. Number two, you have to do your ishtadlut. Number three, you have to pray. And if you do this, you're not going to fail. Now there's the other side of it. Okay? The other three things. What are the other three things that you have to do to make Israel succeed? Number one, do not move to a place where you don't know anybody. I don't think you're going to succeed. You need to go to a place where you have a support system, whether you have friends or you have family. Number two, do your research. Do not just sell your house and say, we're doing this. And don't jump into the pool unless you know there's water. Okay? And make sure it's a heated pool. All right? Because it's not nice jumping into cold water. If you did an ice bath, we can tell you about it. It's not that much fun. Okay? So do your research and talk. Number three, you have resources in Israel from this community. You're not leaving your family. Your family is already in Israel. And you're joining Kibbutz Galiyot. You're joining a bigger family. And you know what? Your parents are going to visit. And your siblings are going to visit. And they're going to see how you're living. And they're going to see the life that you're creating for yourselves. And they're going to be jealous. And a pi halacha, that's a good type of jealousy. The rabbis say, all
right, we have a few minutes left for questions if anyone has any. Sure.
Bobby here? I heard about this Aliyah Baum. I was trying to remember. So, I've been working with Rabbi who, a little bit big into his communal existence. I got a bunch of great guys on board. I've been working trying to find home for the music. It's not an SCA thing, so I don't want Bobby was concerned about that. To find a home for us, just like Adele did at the time, to find a home for us in Jerusalem. And I spent a lot of time there with developers and lawyers and new schools, and believe Rabbi is now behind the project. He grew up in the city, it's called Adele. It's right nearby Baum. It's a beautiful area, it's green, it's got everything going on. If anybody's interested in helping me, getting on board with creating advisory panel, some people I mentioned are on it, Joe Sofer. And we're making a home for our community in Israel and developments that are going up already in Kiryat Israel. So if anybody's interested, in learning more about it, it's very exciting. I guess you can see me. That's my contact. I have a video I'd love to show. That was the commercial. It's still commercial. That was just by the way. It's not that's the commercial. It's all good.
Do we have any questions?
Over there.
All right.
You guys walk away. Introduce yourself, Mark, where you want it.
Hi, my name is Dweck. I've been in Israel for the last couple of years. I'm in the Army. I'm in Bologna right now. Going back to what do you have to say to someone more my age? I don't have a college degree. I don't have much, I'm in the Army salary, isn't that much. Someone like me who's thinking about making Aliyah is just much harder. I don't have anything to go into. I don't have prior. I had worked before I came right out. I just went to the Army. I'm 20 years old now. I'm finishing the Army in 6 months. I want to make Aliyah. I don't have anything to make though. Yes, it's a lot harder for me, in my opinion.
From what I understand, Ben Novik, am I correct? There's about 60 young adults or 70 young adults from the community that are single. Chat to discuss thinking about moving to Israel. I will not release those names because they may get blacklisted. But I think if singles, your age, 20 to 25, go together, sort of like the Friends series, right? Go together, 30, 40, 50, rent in a building, go together, whether it's Yerushalayim, Tawil, wherever it might be. I think you can do it as a group. The only way this is going to work, Aliyah, even with family, you got to do it in groups. Families, as much as you can. It's very hard to do it alone. Singles as well. And create that network. That's how we created it when we were younger.
I also don't really understand the question because what are you going to do here? You're in the same boat. You're still going to have to apply for college, get a job, do all that stuff that you're going to do here. In Israel, you're already there. You already have your group of soldiers that you've already built a deep camaraderie with from the army. You already know the language. You have already your footprint there. So just do what you would do here. Apply to college, learn, get a job. That's it. Okay.
You have a home, come to us, we'll help you.
I was also just going to add, I kind of took it, that, yeah, what you, first of all, I got there when I was 16, and you basically, you can, if you stay there, you build a life there, meaning it looks very difficult, but again, you have an amazing support system, and you can do college in English if that's the problem, you have friends there already, and you end up making more friends, and as everybody said, you can't really envision what's going to end up happening, but it works out because of God.
What are some challenges that Gabriel Bilderucci? Thank you. What are some challenges you expected, and what are some challenges you didn't expect when you made the move?
So, when you make Aliyah, the best advice anybody gave me is don't have any expectations. Expect that everything's gonna go wrong. Because things do go wrong, but when it works out, it's the greatest high you have. So, you know, the challenges that you expect are the same. You have a language barrier, you're dealing with the bureaucracy. You know, you're an outsider. You didn't grow up, you're not Israeli, you grew up there. Everything's new for you. You don't know where to go. You don't know how to chop up the cow in Israel. There's all these numbers, and you can't find the brick roast, right? You don't know what you have to figure out now, which numbers are brick roast. And there's things, there's daily life things that are challenging, but they're not different challenges than you have here. The only difference is that it's new for you. So you have to adapt a little bit more, right? But that's going back to having a strong support system. Like in Granada, we have a huge support system. We have a lot of families coming in. We're building a shul. We have a great support system. So for families that are thinking about, you know, Granada or stuff like that, you have people that already made the mistakes. You have people that went through the challenges that you literally can learn exactly the steps that they did that were successful, right? So some of the challenges that are expected are getting the kids in school. The worries about is the school right. No school in Israel is good. You either get too much of this or too much of that. But how much is tuition there? But you could afford to get the tutors you need, right? I think I spent between all 4 kids no more than 1,000 shekels on books, PTA, and everything. Okay, that's huge. So my kids are getting English tutors. They're getting tutors in Chazanut. They're getting what they need because it doesn't matter. It's pennies compared to what I was doing with here. It's nothing. So I could afford to provide them with the additional education that they need, and also the mindset is different. Okay, specifically for children in Israel. Okay, so the early years, meaning let's say after high school, they're focusing on developing how children think. They're focusing on developing the children's personality, and how they are, who they are. Why? And teamwork also. Why? Because most of these children are going to be going to the army. Okay? And this one's very important that children can be children. That they're not crammed down with tons of homework. Okay? They're learning what they need to learn in order so that they get to the next level in high school. And that's when things really start. That's when they're about doing everything. But Israel is a country that is for the nuclear family, that was established, and everything runs there for a family. Everything is focused on the children and on their future, and them becoming individuals that they were born to be, right? So schooling, that's a challenge. It's a challenge to find the right school. And a lot of people don't find the right school the first time, okay? It's the same here. Nobody's happy with the schools they go to. It could be better here, it could be better there. It's not different over there, okay? The difference is that now I can give the extracurriculars to my child that I couldn't give before because there wasn't enough time. Just the funds weren't there. But there are challenges. There are the right challenges that you deal with anyway.
Thank you, Matthew. Anyone else have an answer to
I know. We have the soldiers program right after this. So I would say the biggest challenge has been, all my kids are awesome, but the biggest challenge for me is speaking Hebrew. And I went to Adele for a lot of years. I never learned Hebrew. It's still a challenge. It's still going to be a challenge. And we live in Renana where Hebrew is a second language. Second, the other part that was shocking to me, you expect everybody to give you hugs and kisses that you made Aliyah, and the regular Israeli could care less that you left your entire life here to go there. Took a long time, like you could be a little nicer to me. Don't make me go back to the same office 4 times to give 1 document. That was shocking to me, because you expected Kibbutz Galiyot, but that's really more the governmental offices. The second tier, which is the general population, whenever you need something, everybody's there. It feels like this community. The most amazing network, you'd be surprised. And everybody's there to help you no matter what it is.
I made the move from Anana to this community. And to your answer, I finished the arcade, don't college, you know nothing. And I just came, and you just make the move, and you just do it. Everything just worked out. I came here, no support, no nothing. $5,000 in my bank account, and a good day like that. So if you want to move to Israel, just do it. You know, family's here, you're gonna succeed. Life goes on. No one guaranteed you're gonna succeed here. So it's both ways.
Thank you. Do you have any more questions? Any women with questions? All right, we got one.
Is the goal of like this panel the long-term plan that maybe you guys all have in mind? Is it that more Syrians are going to move there or to create a Syrian community in Israel? Or is it that you kind of want everyone to integrate into Israeli society and young people there? Because like I heard someone say, we're making shul, and then I heard you say, we have our own group in Baum. Like, is that the goal? Like, I'm a little confused.
Thank you for the question. Your name is?
Joy Perez.
Thank you, Joy. So I'm going to let Edward answer after me. Yeah, that's the goal of the panel, and surprising, it was my idea, this panel. Of course, I couldn't have done it without these amazing people on board, without Dweck and Rabbi Tawil agreeing and giving me advice and saying, yes, let's make this happen, it's a great idea. But my idea really was, first of all, not to sell anything, because I don't know how to sell anything. And also, because I don't think that Israel needs to be sold to anyone. I think that there's plenty of people who just want to move there. That's my experience of this growing up in this community. Definitely not everyone, I don't know if it's most people, but that will, that desire already exists. And naturally, the people that are going to do it, the people that have done it, are sort of okay just jumping in and realizing there's no community schools, no community synagogues, no community infrastructure. We become Israeli because we have to be, and we don't need those things. And that's what I like to call Halutzim. Halutzim are pioneers. The first people that are going to move have to deal with things missing. But I can say I'm in Israel 8 years now, and I've had the privilege to meet a lot of community members all over the country that have made Aliyah, and I find that different people will give you different answers to that question. What is our goal? Are we trying to make a mini community in Israel? What would that look like? And I think that you get different answers. The people who have been there longer, I think will say, we're Israeli, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's Kibbutz Galiyot, we're integrating, and that's our goal. And I think that there's a lot of truth to that, and there's no need to be apologetic about that. But it's definitely something that's difficult to hear. For those people who aren't ready to be a halutz, to be a pioneer, they don't want to hear that. And there's so much richness in our heritage and what we have in this community that it's a shame to leave behind, and it's jarring to hear someone say that they're ready to sort of walk away from that. Although I don't interpret this part of the country as being that, but I think that people who've made Aliyah more recently, and it's becoming, the numbers are growing from very little to very little. I think that there's more of a willingness to get together. For the past 2 years, we've had a Yom Ha'atzmaut get-together barbecue. Not everyone comes. I try to make sure that everyone knows about it, and everyone that's involved in this, make sure that people know about it. People who've been there for a long time don't feel they need that. They don't need that sort of support. The community in Israel is different than here. It's definitely a part of our lives for a lot of us, but it's not the only community. You have to be part of something else. It's just not enough. And that's why a lot of us are here. We're here this summer for however much time, because we want to stay connected to that. And now I'm going to let Rabbi Benjamin.
You did fine. You did fine.
All right.
I also think there's a big difference between first generation Aliyah and being born in Israel. So my husband was, his dad, Rabbi, moved to Israel, and I moved to Israel. All of us here, we're from the community, and you see us here in deals, trying to be connected, and I miss the shuls here. But my husband grew up in Israel, and all his siblings, and his siblings aren't coming here for the summer, and his siblings aren't going to the barbecue. Because as Moey said, the more you're in Israel, the less you feel the need. You're less like say part of the Syrian community, but you get Am Yisrael as a community. And I imagine my daughter too, she's going to be connected to America because I am, but much less. And the more you're in Israel, the less you are connected to what's here just naturally. So, and I think also the plan to the Syrian mountain path has been around for dozens of years. And I think it just doesn't work because everyone that moves to Israel, we're all coming at different stages and we want different things, and the beautiful thing is Israel can offer it to everyone. You don't need to live in a certain area. David made it clear in Renana to go there. I'm in Jerusalem, but we can stay before. Everyone is somewhere else. And the country offers whatever you want to whoever you need. And I think people go based on what their family needs, and less in terms of let's do it as a community. Maybe it'll work, but I just know up until this point there hasn't been a community move.
It's gonna change.
I'll say this, I think the community is going to move. You're going to have probably 25 to 30% in the next 15 years, if not sooner, that are going to move. But you're going to go to pockets of communities. There are people who like Jerusalem. There are people who like Tel Aviv. There are people who are going to like Moey. There are people who like Renana. We can still maintain our community identity. It drove me crazy to go only to Ashkenaz, Minyans, and Renana. It was driving me crazy. It was actually driving my children crazy. Why can't we have our own identity, meet other people, get out of the tribe, but at least have our own prayers that we recognize? So I think you can do a combination of both, and that's what we're trying to do, because it's not easy to move. So we're going to develop a soft landing. Many of you could move to Renana. Hopefully Moey will have a Syrian, and you can still pray your way and still meet all the wonderful people in Israel.
Thank you, David. All right, I'm going to about to wrap up this program, and maybe for the next program, I just want to say one more thing on that topic, which I think is a great topic. I'm glad you asked the question. It's something I think about a lot, and as much as I think about it, there's only so much that a few individuals can do. You can move yourself, to move an entire community, to shape an entire community, just kind of happens on itself. I think that the one that's guiding things is Baruch Hu, and we do what we decide what's right, where we think we belong, what we think can happen. Baruch Hu does as Baruch Hu does. And another thing that I think is important, and something that maybe I think about more now that I live in Israel, is that something is already happening. A process of kibbutz galuyot, a process of a melting pot, a new identity being formed. And I talk to my neighbors, and they say I'm also Halabi, and also Russian, and also Persian, and also this. There's so many people who already moved into a different stage, and there's a new national identity being formed, and people know about more customs, and it's harder to, hold on to stay separate. But learning about other customs is also a nice thing, and that melting pot seems to be part of God's plan. And I'm afraid that we're going to miss out on it. There are not that many Syrian Jews in the world. There are other Sephardic communities that are a lot bigger, have always been a lot bigger than ours. And we have an opportunity to make an impact on Israel, on the Jewish future, and give of our rich community to that shared future. And it would be a shame for everyone to miss out on that. So with that, I'm going to wrap up the event. Thank you very much for everyone.